Hi guys, and welcome to another load order video. This will be the last one before chapter 2 begins, and I just want to cover the mods that will be appearing in this next chapter. Now, I've already discussed a lot of the visual mods, the lighting mods, so I've replaced ELFX with ELE and relighting Skyrim. I'm keeping the weather mod, although I am still very interested in trying NAT out. I think if I can get the nights looking okay, looking visible, I really want to try that weather mod out. It looks good. That's nothing bad against Obsidian weathers. It's a great mod. There's a little part of me wants a change. I'm still using Noble Skyrim. That seems to be a very good option. And blended roads. However, I did say I was going to use Skyland. However, I've decided not to do that. I have gone back to Majestic Mountains, which is a good mod. Now, the decision had nothing to do with not liking Skyland. On the contrary, I actually think Skyland is really good. The problem is there's a slight conflict between Skyland and Verdant, the grass mod I'm using. Oh yeah, I'm using Verdant for grass and enhanced vanilla trees to make the trees look more lush, more full, and have slightly more details while still looking fairly vanilla. I'm using some distant terrain mods, as you can probably tell, and DynDOLOD, so the distant terrain should look an awful lot better. I still occasionally notice some Z flicker, but that's Skyrim for you. So what's the problem between Skyland and Verdant? It's pretty simple. When you get to the Whiterun area, Skyland changes the textures of the grass. See the grass in the distance? It changes it to be a light brown yellow colour. Now, it looks good. I actually quite like it. Unfortunately, because I'm using a mod that adds a lot more grass, it's inconsistent. Look at the grass down there. Notice it's a sort of brown-green colour, but it's dark. And notice the terrain. They're not too dissimilar. They're not the same, but they're not too dissimilar. With Skyland, they were massively different. And the problem is, I don't know if you can you see the snow area where the grass is popping in? You can see the grass clearly popping in. Now it's back on the green area. It's a little harder to notice. It's sometimes easier to see it on the other side of the river, actually. Look at the other side of the river. There's no grass there currently, but it's not immediately noticeable. If I run forward, you will see grass begin to appear, and it will crawl up. There it is. Crawls up the bank. Now, with Skyland installed, that was insanely noticeable. Because the land was a lot lighter than the grass, it looked like the grass was growing before your very eyes. And it was just so obvious, I couldn't stop staring at it. Whereas at least with this texture, I don't notice it as much. It's still visible, actually, but I don't notice it as much. I do like the way the... See, a little bit of Z flicker there. I do like DynDOLOD. It does make distant terrain look a lot nicer, doesn't it? I mean, this is one of the ugliest areas of Skyrim. But yeah, so I did try to get the grass to pop in further away, because I've got a system that should be able to handle it. But I couldn't. No matter what I tried, I got it to pop quite far, but then it was very, very abrupt. It didn't have a sort of smooth transition, and that was very noticeable. The only way I think I would be able to really get the grass to spawn a lot further away is to push the U grids to load, and I'm loath to do that on this save. I'm loath to take risks with this save, and of course that is still, you know, I mean, I know it's a lot safer than it used to be, and Skyrim Special Edition handles it a lot better, and there are ways to try it out and go back, but I'm still nervous about that sort of thing breaking quests. I'm still noticing some popping in. I may redo my DynDOLOD And I think there's an option to use 3D trees instead of the billboards to get less popping. It's still a hell of a lot better than it used to be. Anyway, so that's it. Skyland at the moment I've had to remove because in this area I just found it too distracting. The difference between the grass colour and the ground colour was so jarring that, you know, I can sort of ignore it here. I mean, because we're looking for it now, you can see the grass clearly moving away. But when it was the yellow colour, you couldn't stop looking at it. So there you go. So there have been some changes to the visual mods. Beyond that, what mods will I be using? Well, I'm going to be using Artful Dodger to increase the pickpocket cap dynamically. I'm going to be using Predator Vision to add night vision via alchemy and spells, that sort of thing, so that I can make the video a little more viewable while still keeping the vibe of darkness, still being able to use ELE. So I'm going to be trying to make some potions of night vision for those dungeons where it's just so damned dark and I've got no way of functioning as a thief. I have also removed Skyrim Special Edition fixes and replaced it with Skyrim Special Edition engine fixes, which is supposed to, well, fix more things. This was because a lot of people were suggesting it, so I'm going to try that out. I also want to try Quick Loot. However, I'm not going to have that enabled in the first few episodes. And the reason for that is, of course, some people did get some crashing with that mod, and I don't want to install it until I've made sure all the other mods that I'm using are not causing crashing. For example, DynDOLOD. I did actually get a couple of crashes when I was playing around with DynDOLOD on one of the earlier versions. I think the new version has cleared that up for me, so I don't think I'm going to have any problems, but I want to do a couple of episodes before I add something else that might cause crashes. I also need to tweak it a little bit to be more consistent with the standard Skyrim looting. You know, when you look at something and you get a message that gives you the option, there you go, to harvest, I want the loot thing to be close to that so my eyes aren't constantly zipping around. My initial instinct was to place it in the bottom right, out of the way. However, I found as I was moving around from container to container, when there was a container that was empty, or when I was looking like something like this, the details were at the center, whereas when I looked at a normal container, the details were down at the bottom, and it was actually uncomfortable. You don't think about things like that when you're setting stuff up, but when you start using them, you notice it straight away. Anyway, so I will be adding that somewhere in the playthrough, in Chapter 2, probably, assuming I don't get any other crashes. Trying to find a decent missile weapon mod has been somewhat difficult. I'm trying to balance conflicting needs. There are occasions where you just need a missile weapon. We saw that in Chapter 1, but I've deliberately made Leonard somewhat reluctant to use bows. They're large, they're cumbersome, they take a lot of strength to draw back. This sort of, you know, I've gone out of my way to make Leonard somebody who really does not gravitate towards that sort of weapon. That's partly because I really do want to experience a different play style, a get-up close and personal play style, but it's also because I do want to differentiate between Richard and Leonard in some ways. I do want a very different way of doing things. Crossbow seems to be a decent halfway compromise. This is the Thieves Guild crossbow, and it's part of the Factions Crossbow mod. I think it looks brilliant, and I can sort of see Leonard taking this along as a backup. This is the sort of thing that it takes a little bit of strength, but it's, you know, you draw the string. What is that called? Whatever. You know, you get the thing set up and ready to go, and then there's no strength needed at this point. It's all ready, and this I feel suits Leonard a little better, and it is smaller. Crossbows are smaller. I'll be able to leave them on my horse and then just take them in dungeons when I need them, but I don't necessarily need to carry one around town, because that's what I was thinking. I want to have this sort of weapon just in case I'm about to head into a dungeon and I might need it. I can tell you I considered a number of other mods that added missile weapons, including the thrown weapons mod, which is really good and I think would have suited Leonard. It was far more limiting. You had to be a lot closer to use the dagger, and you know, it would have meant you got 3 or 4 thrown daggers, but then you couldn't keep shooting them. You couldn't carry 600 thrown daggers the way you can carry 600 arrows. But the animation was a little off. It felt a little wrong, and combat was a tiny bit clumsy, actually. The combat being clumsy was less of an issue because that would restrict how much I use it. But the animation, it wasn't the third-person animation that bothers me because I'll very rarely see it. It was the first-person animation. The way he held the knife and hurled it felt odd. Now, if this was a playthrough for myself, I'd probably ignore it, because after a little while I stopped looking at my hands, I guess. But because it's a Let's Play, I'd be keenly aware of the fact that this animation was not quite right, and thus would be just... it's the sort of thing that bothers me when I'm making a Let's Play, because I want it to be a little more... well, a little less irritating for people with OCD, shall we say. Myself included. So in the end, although I did love that mod, I decided against it. The same is true of the blowgun. The blowgun, I mean, as soon as I saw that, I thought, my God, this is perfect for Leonard. Too perfect, maybe. I mean, I was worried that would be... I mean, the blowgun is... it's just such a good idea and would be so tempting to use. Just poison a dart and blow a dart in someone's neck and then paralyzed poison. However, the animation on it is a little off. It uses the crossbow animation. It's not terrible, but it is noticeably odd. And you don't put the tube to your mouth, you sort of hold it off to the side. So it is odd, and so for the same reason as the thrown weapons, it just felt wrong for a Let's Play. Plus, the reload sound was the sound of the crossbow reload. You could get rid of that, but then it got rid of it for all crossbows, and I have a feeling at some point Leonard is going to need a weapon that's a little stronger. Just for the occasional encounter, a crossbow may be needed, and I don't want the reload sound going. So, in the end, after spending quite a lot of time trying a number of different things, I just went for a crossbow. It's different enough that I don't mind it being one of Leonard's weapons, and it's not too powerful or too tempting to use, because they're pretty loud, really. Honestly, when you shoot a crossbow, everyone within about 200 meters should know you're there. I might actually tweak that. I wonder if that is the case. I've not tried shooting someone with a crossbow to see if I'm detected by people nearby, but it wouldn't be too hard to make the crossbow an alerting weapon, would it? That would actually be... yeah, okay, you know what? I'm getting a bit carried away. I'm discussing mods. Now, probably the last thing to discuss are armor mods. As you can see here, I'm wearing the Guildmaster's armor and Linway's HUD. I think this is a good look for Leonard. It's a little darker. It's almost black, but more like a dark brown. I don't like the Thieves Guild or the Guildmaster's HUD. I don't like the shape. I much prefer Linway's HUD. Now, I did try to find some retextures and changes for the Nightingale armor, but I just couldn't find anything I loved. I did get a maskless version by porting one across from Old Rim, although I accidentally deleted it. After getting it working, I accidentally deleted it, which was very annoying. But I tried the Nightingale Prime, which is a really good texture. But the one from Old Rim just looks a little too modern. I think it just looks too modern, at least for this playthrough. The one for Skyrim Special Edition, it looked good, but I actually felt it looked way too clean. So, and they don't have a maskless version. I really want a maskless version. So I'm still on the fence about Nightingale armor. But honestly, I want to try some mods for armor because there are so many good ones. And I've also decided that I'm probably going to install and use a lot of different armor mods. Because, let's face it, Leonard is not the sort of person to just have one outfit. And, I mean, there were plenty of outfits there on the Nexus that really looked cool, but wouldn't necessarily be good for thieving, for example. There was this one armor set called the Armor of Intrigue, which is an incredible suit of armor. It's classy, it's black, it looks mysterious and yet somehow noble and rich. But it does look like war armor, armor for a warrior. It's light, it's not heavy material, but it's definitely armor that you could fight in, you could go to battle in, and it's not exactly the sort of armor you would crawl through a window in. You know, like Thief armor has, for all of its protective value, it's shaped in such a way that you can get in and out of places. Here's the thing. I can easily see Leonard having two outfits. One for his nocturnal activities, and another for, I don't know, wandering around in a certain town. I mean, this outfit's probably okay in Riften, but it's not really appropriate to go to the Blue Palace in, is it? Whereas something like the Armor of Intrigue, well, you could actually see somebody walking in there with that and looking like a noble. There was the Huntsman's armor, which looked more like, to be honest with you, what that looked like was clothing that had some small pieces of armor that were barely any protection, and it's the sort of armor a young noble might wear trying to look like he was wearing armor whilst being dashing. And of course my next thought was, yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing Leonard would wear. So basically the biggest changes this time are the visual changes, new lighting, new textures and new distant terrain. I will continue to tweak the visuals. If I find other texture mods that I like, I may add them on top of the ones I've got. I may continue to tweak the lighting. And yes, I may even use an ENB one day, although that is the last thing that I will add. That is a post-processing mod, which means it changes what you see on the screen, but often the engine is unaware of the changes that you can see. You may not think that's important, but for a stealth playthrough that is critically important, as an ENB might well make a room or a corner look nice and dark, but in actual fact, as far as the game's concerned, it's well lit. So you're stood there in a deep shadow thinking, tee-hee, I will never be spotted, and everybody in the place sees you instantly. I will need to get an ENB that does not tweak the shadows and the light levels too much, and only changes what I need. And I suspect I can find a lot of that in some other mods anyway. But I'm not against using an ENB, it just will be one of the last things I install. I am going to consider many more weapon mods, many more armor mods, and those are the sort of things that I can install midway through a chapter, usually. As long as they're not too heavy, those sort of mods don't have too much of an effect on... okay, that armor is a little... Right, nice armor, Hadvar. It's a bit shiny, isn't it? So yeah, so I can add those as I go along. Things like content mods, quest mods, mods that add new areas or new buildings, those are the sort of things I generally prefer to add in chapter breaks. They require a little more testing, they require a little more caution when installing. You know, sometimes you need to go into interiors and wait 3 or 4 days, that sort of thing. So those things will not appear, but you may see more mods appear in Chapter 2 as we progress. As Leonard suddenly thinks, you know what I need right now? I need an outfit for such and such an event. And he may run off to town and say, blacksmith, I have a commission for you. And thus another mod is installed. So that's it. Hopefully this wasn't too long and boring. I'm looking at the time. It was long, probably boring as well. You know what? I've given up apologising. That's probably a lie. I'm probably going to do it again. So there is my load order. That is what is going to be in Chapter 2. A much prettier experience. Actually, a lot prettier experience. And, well, keep your eyes open for Episode 1. And I will see you guys there.